There are 11 artists. We all have kind of individual varying practices, but obviously when we come together, we are a very collective. And that was in the 90s, it first came to be. And then around times of the noughties, then it became Array Studios. I guess especially the time that it initiated, there was a richness of artist-led spaces and kind of DIY activity and DIY spaces going on at the time.
Array expanded and developed quite naturally into a collective due to the political climate at the time, the fact we were all friends out marching for causes that we believed in. And the studio is where 6 of us have a physical studio space, but the collective is where the group of artists that make things happen.
We would kind of, if someone had an idea, you would share it with the group and then everyone would come together to make it happen. Then that's when sort of local activist groups would start to approach us and ask us to give them a hand with visuals. But again, like, we are very much part of that community, so we're not working for people, it's kind of ourselves as well. And then for about 2 years, there was a real push for political causes that we felt very strongly about. So the 2 main ones would have been the abortion law and marriage equality. Yeah, and we didn't really see that as an artistic practice. It was more us out campaigning for our human rights, really. But again, they're all campaigns that were quite personal to us. So we always felt like we were part of the communities that we're working with and for. You know, in Ireland, abortion and queer rights are quite, shrouded in shame and secrecy. So it did feel quite important for us to be out really confidently and unashamedly kind of dressed up in these costumes and having a bit of crack about it. It was quite challenging, that period of just constant protest. Like, for a while, felt like we were out every week, sometimes more than that.
So for a number of those rallies, like, we've gone as Mother Ireland to International Women's Day, we've gone as a set of shielding gigs to Rally for Choice. There was a number of wedding cakes made for marriage equality.
I obviously am not from the north of Ireland, but moving over here kind of felt very much that, like, my rights had been changed. The strongest elements of working in Belfast is this interconnected nature of the arts community. Everyone's kind of in the same boat, so there's a real sharing. There's no real kind of hierarchy when it comes to kind of the larger kind of studio groups and smaller studio groups. We were very aware of the fact that, like, kind of people, activists have been kind of working within the realms of kind of women's rights, LGBTQ rights, the Irish language, mental health for decades before we are just in the next part of that story. And I think that, a lot of the kind of more mature activists kind of are wanting kind of more young people to kind of take up this and kind of push them forward.
We'd all kind of stick together to look after each other, to protest about the stuff that's really important to us and important to our kind of friends and community in the north, but also that we have the crack. And that's really, really important. If you think of any of the great social movements, they always needed really strong visuals. They always had artists as key to kind of that cultural and social change.
The reason you interject crack or fun into it is by a way of reaching people and discussing really, really heavy stuff playfully. Yeah, I think it's also important to kind of consider that we're coming from a post-conflict society, and the north of Ireland and Ireland in general is, like, stereotypically almost like not a place where people discuss very difficult things openly. So to kind of take it to the street playfully and fun is kind of, it's very new. It's not done traditionally.
For the Turner Prize 2021 exhibition, we have decided to kind of expand our practice that we had previously been working on in other shows, where we used folklore and pre-Christian characters to represent different identities in the north of Ireland, but kind of moving away from the typical narratives that you would see in the news. We have looked at different identities, so queer identities, expats, and we've also looked at characters such as the media and the police, and kind of creative parody characters based on kind of folklore. So these characters use materials and use kind of imagery from folklore to represent modern day identities. So we created an event called the Druids Ball, and we invited friends of ours, artist friends and comrades and allies, to create their own characters. The event was based around the centenary of Ireland, so it's 100 years since the partition of Northern Ireland. In the kind of style of that celebration, that wake, that Irish pub tradition, we are going to translate that into the show in Coventry. It's our interpretation of the centenary, or what Northern Ireland means or doesn't mean. The Turner Prize has been a really good way for Northern Irish practice and activism, and maybe changing narratives as well. For us, it's about sustaining this practice, sustaining our relationships with other arts organisations, other political organisations in Northern Ireland and the wider island of Ireland. People are able to come here and work in this space. It's a shared space, the door is open.